Good evening. I'd like to call the City Council meeting to order for April 18th, 2023 here at City Hall. Would the clerk please confirm the roll?
All council members are present with the exception of Council Member Jocelyn, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. With an honored guest tonight, I'm going to ask that Mr. Chris Garcia lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you unknowingly letting me put you on the spot. I see we have some other distinguished guests tonight, and I'm not going to be able to resist pointing out that my daughters are here. And my daughter's daughter is here. Hi, Zuzu. Was there any other business tonight? I think okay. The baby card. Pulling the baby card. Everybody better be on their best behavior, because I can have her do something you will be surprised. With that, the first item on tonight's agenda is the consent agenda. We have 4 items. I have a motion by Mr. Gottheld. Help me move it along. Second by Mr. Elwood. Any all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
The motion is approved. Thank you very much. We'll move into citizen comments. If you are a member of the public here in council chambers or online tonight and wish to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda, we would be happy to hear from you. You will have 3 minutes. You'll start with your name and address for the record. We'll start here in chambers, then move online. Is there anyone here in chambers wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda? Come on up to the podium.
Hello, my name is Dylan Johnson. My address is 41502 Southeast Reinig Road, Snoqualmie, Washington. I came here to speak because I recently took on the operations manager position at the Snoqualmie Valley Food Bank, and we have recently been in more need than in some times in the past. 2 weeks ago, we had the largest number of households we've served, and that was 275 households here in the Valley, and there was just under 700 individuals in that group. These people come every week, food, most of them, and we have been sometimes in short supply. Most important and the most dire need, as I see it, is community support, especially volunteers and drivers. 7 days a week, we pick up food from QFC, 6 days a week from the Ridge Safeway, 5 days a week from North Bend Safeway, once a week, Costco, and Target in Issaquah. We go to the Metropolitan Market in Sammamish twice a week. There's a lot of volume, a lot of weight, a lot of heavy lifting. And a lot of our volunteers are retired folks, many of whom have retired from volunteering. And it is a physical job. Obviously, we don't make a profit, so we can't really afford to hire anyone for this. But I've been trying to put up flyers all around town in both cities. And I've basically really just been hoping to reach out to the community. And of course, financial support and donations are always in need. But once again, currently, we are the most in need of volunteers and just human power to get these groceries into needy people's hands. And I believe that is all that I really needed to say today. But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming, Ryan. Appreciate that. Anyone else here in chambers? Bree, do we have anyone online?
No one online.
Thank you. With that, then we will move on to commission and committee reports. We'll start with Ms. Miller, Community and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. CED met today. This is the 18th, 2023 in April. Met at about 3:30 and we had quite a bit on our agenda. Started off with Bill Shaw from the Valley Record Sound Publishing, and he kind of gave us a overview of what he can do with sound publishing and a little bit more of an advertising and needs that are very interesting to have here in North Bend. He's very well connected, and it was wonderful to have that interaction. We next talked about Chapter 15 Amendment, which is the Wildlife Urban Interface. We had an introduction to that. Our next was the comp plan scoping. It was kind of an FYI, pardon me for that. Don't even look at what happened right there. But I know you can. Anyway, that was led by Mike McCarty, very informative. We also had Mayor Robb speak into the Meadowbrook contract and give us an update there. We also had a very nice conversation, and yes, North Bend Downtown Foundation presented what's happening, and it's an amazing and exciting contract update. So we were interested and very supportive of listening in. So that's exciting. And there was one more, and I forgot what that was. Pardon me. It was Mike McCarty talking about what would he like here? Thank you. And that was it for now. So we'll be meeting next month, I think on the 23rd, and you all had a great time. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Godhelp, Finance and Administration.
Thank you. The Finance Administration Committee met April 11th at 4 p.m. at the City Hall Adjournment Room. We discussed two items that are on tonight's agenda: the ordinance repealing North Bend's Municipal Code 3.3 regarding purchasing, and a procurement policy resolution establishing a new policy, but an ordinance removing one. It's also on the regular agenda. We quickly discussed discussing the next meeting, strategic plan for long-term economic development and fiscal sustainability draft report. And at the next F&A, we got a quick glimpse of Q1 financial reports. And then pending items going forward are city debt reconciliation, financial reporting for the quarterly reports, and finance department staffing size and comparatives of other cities. And that is all.
Thank you. Mr. Rosen, Public Health and Safety.
Met on April 4th here at City Hall at 4 o'clock. 3 items on our agenda. First, I believe will be on tonight's agenda as well. Regional Coordination Framework Agreement. This will allow the city of North Bend to receive aid from other local cities. In case of an emergency, it'll put in place financial issue. It'll solve financial issues of reimbursement and so forth, and allow us to execute agreements instantly, so that we can get aid in case of emergencies without having to go through the lengthy process of individual contracts with individual cities. Cities such as Bellevue, Redmond, I think Issaquah are already part of this and will be joining that. We can all provide mutual aid to each other. Let's see, we also got a real upbeat police update, maybe slightly sarcastic. We did talk about some of the issues down in Olympia and what's being done down there. Some of these reform acts in the past that are being tweaked a little bit. I think the consensus was there may be need for a little more tweaking on some of the pursuit issues, but I believe we are making progress, and that was consensus I heard. We still have a ways to go, and hopefully we'll continue with those adjustments. And we also had a fire update, and that is all, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Laudenbach, Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you, Your Honor. Public Works and Transportation Committee met on March 28th at City Hall in the adjournment room. We had a presentation from Mr. Tucker concerning accepting bill of sale for the 109 Degrees development, which is the townhouses on Park Street. We had a discussion about motion authorizing professional services contract with Parametrics. We had Mr. Rigos and Mr. Marcinko talk about a motion adopting an ordinance for the franchise agreement with Puget Sound Energy. We discussed the potential future acquisition of a street sweeper, as ours is were 24 years old and not functioning at peak performance. And we also discussed some of the options for the South Fork Avenue extension project. Our next meeting will be on next Tuesday at 4 o'clock in the adjournment room.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Cullen, Mayor Pro Tem report.
So we met last for a work study on March 28th, 7 p.m. at City Hall. We discussed the Meadowbrook interlocal agreement between the cities of Snoqualmie and North Bend. The city of North Bend, city of Snoqualmie, and Snoqualmie Tribe are in negotiations to form a new ILA concerning the management, operation, and governance of Meadowbrook Farm. Key components of the new ILA are: number one, Snoqualmie, North Bend, and Snoqualmie Tribe be the governing body that approves budgets and plans and provides funding 1/3 each. Number two, Skyview Parks would be for maintenance and management. Number three, Meadowbrook Farm Preservation Association, they would be docent, educational, and interpretive activities only. And four, Meadowbrook Policy Advisory Board, they would recommend updates to plans, major capital improvements, major policy, and use issues.
Very much. Mr. Godhealth, back to you. Eastside Fire and Rescue.
Thank you. The Eastside Fire and Rescue Board met April 13th at 4 p.m. at Eastside Fire and Rescue's headquarters. There were two agenda items that had to do with policies, one relating to the fire chief's performance, and then the other relating to board directors' policy and checking on remote attendance we discussed. There was also a great discussion about our emergency management. It was nice to hear a lot of positive relationships and joint efforts with North Bend. One is a tabletop, I understand, coming on. In fact, after everybody hearing all the mentions about North Bend, they were all going, "Oh, how do we get involved in it?" So it was nice to hear how we're working very well with the emergency management division there and all the things that come to our city. So phenomenal job on it, everybody. And then was extended because I did my yearly board orientation presentation to review the things that our board members should be responsible for and what they need to do, and talk about, you know, risk and liability and the RCAWs that relate to the board. So it was a fun and rousing discussion. And the other thing was talked about was Fireground 425, and I think Heather's going to join it on that. Is that true, Heather? I didn't mean to. So that's been close.
There is no other answer now.
Potentially.
But it's a lot of fun. We talked about that. And then what was it?
Right. Fantastic report. Thank you. Missions.
Yes, the Planning Commission did not meet on April 5th. Tomorrow, Wednesday, April 19th, the Planning Commission will meet jointly with the Parks Commission to review draft amendments to the park element of the comprehensive plan. Additionally, the Planning Commission will meet on the Housing Action Plan for a public hearing on May 3rd. Parks Commission last met February 15th jointly with the Planning Commission for public hearing regarding those park element amendments. Commission received public comment for and at the hearing. Staff has subsequently prepared amendments addressing those comments. As mentioned, the Parks Commission will next meet tomorrow with the Planning Commission to review and anticipate recommendation of the draft amendment. The Economic Development Commission last met Tuesday, March 28th. Commission discussed the Economic Development Action Plan on today's council agenda. EDC will next meet Tuesday, April 25th. The Commission will review the economic development element of the comp plan and start to provide direction, starting the process for updating the element.
Very much. Council Regional Committee reports. Mr. Umbeck.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Public Issues Committee of the Sound Cities Association last met on April 12th. We had a full agenda. We firstly got an update from our legislative liaison from AWC, Candace Bach. Topics of discussion were some of the issues that had not passed out of the current legislative session, including the transit-oriented development program. HB 1110, however, did pass out and is on its way to the governor for signature. The Blake decision reform that Mr. Rosen mentioned earlier is back with the Senate and headed for conference due to a disagreement about potential penalties for drug possession between the two bodies. 5332 Senate bill, the pursuit bill, by many were considered too watered down. However, it did receive a bipartisan pass just recently and will be going to the governor for signature. House Bill 1628 is still in play, an affordable housing REIT increase for everybody who will be acquiring real property. 5770, which was a late entry from the Senate, proposing to take the 1% cap off property and move it to a 3% annual potential growth based on population growth and inflation. And we'll anxiously await the Senate's decision on that. Wastewater rate from the WWTT apparently will be going up. There's a surprise. Metro Water Pollution Abatement Advisory Committee says that they are woefully underfunded and they will be coming for more funding. The Veterans and Seniors levy will be coming up for renewal. And while it's trade as a renewal, it will be approximately a 30% increase. That's it, Your Honor. Too much good news all in one bag.
It's a lot. Thank you, Mr. Laudenbach. Ms. Collin?
King County Board of Health met on March 16th at 12 o'clock via Zoom/hybrid courthouse on 3rd Avenue. The next meeting is on May 18th at 12 o'clock via Zoom. They discussed youth and cannabis use. They want to focus on the very young, 0 to 5, and pets that are accidentally ingesting cannabis products that look like candy. They would like to implement a safe storage program, and they want to change the labeling and packaging that is targeted to our teenagers for vapes and oils. They also talked about legislative bills that have died and some that are still alive. 5080 is for social equity in cannabis. This is about all THC products. Bill 1047, limit and remove toxics in makeup and beauty products. Bill 5022, exempt fentanyl testing equipment. 1240, ban the sale of semi-automatic assault weapons. And 1117, they're working on missing Indigenous women in cold cases. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Down this end of the table. And just to shorten tonight's comments, upcoming meetings for PSRC Executive Board, King County Growth Management Board, those are both this coming week. King County Flood Control District agenda is set for multiple meetings coming up, but nothing current on that. Next SVGA meeting is going to be here in North Bend at the end of May. So we'll be looking forward to that. Council, remember that. This is our turn to host. Be at that. Hey, with that, we're ready for the main agenda. Item number 5, AB 23-046. This is a resolution authorizing a regional coordination framework agreement. Mr. Rigos, introductions.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. Good evening, Council. Page 19 in your packet. Just have a short staff report tonight. This is an agreement between the city and King County about resource procurement during an emergency. For us in North Bend, possible emergencies could include an earthquake, flood, snowstorm, windstorm, or forest fire. Any of these events, if significant enough, could trigger the need for significantly more resources than North Bend has immediately available. Resources could be in the form of equipment, additional staffing, specialized staffing, and or materials. King County is the lead for this agreement, and many other agencies have already signed on. Benefits to the city of North Bend of receiving additional resources and quicker resources include protection of public and private properties, public safety, public health, faster return to normal conditions. is a positive move for North Bend, and city staff recommend this agreement be approved.
Thank you. Council, clarifying questions before I move to public comment. Seeing none. If you're a member of the public wish to speak on this agenda item, either here in council chambers or online, please indicate. And we'll start here in chambers. If you would like to speak on this item, please come forward to the podium. Seeing none. Bree, do we have anyone online?
No one online.
Thank you. Mr. Rosen, I believe this came through your committee.
Motion to approve AB 23-046, a resolution authorizing an agreement for participation in a regional coordination framework.
Second.
Motion and a second by Mr. Godhealth. Mr. Rosen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Anything that will allow us to respond better and faster in case of an emergency deserves.
Thank you, Mr. Godhealth.
This has been before us and something I support wholeheartedly. We had to build our own agreements during one of our Snowmageddon events. So this helps us in the future be able to lend our resources or our partners lend their resources and have an ILA set up to be able to accommodate it. Good pass.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, the motion is to approve AB 23-046, resolution authorizing an agreement for participation in the regional coordination framework. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 6, AB 23-047. This is a motion to approve the Economic Development Action Plan. Mr. Knoll, I believe you're going to lead off this evening. Is that
correct? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And good evening, council. What I've included in your packet this evening, what I've put on the screen is the process and the timeline that we have followed for this Economic Development Action Plan. And what I hope to convey this evening and highlight is the process that we've followed and to present the amount of effort and time that's gone into this body of work. And so I'll walk through the timeline. Even before what we see on the screen here and in your packet, this dates back to early 2020. City Council directed staff and the Economic Development Commission, or the EDC, to develop a citywide economic development strategy. In response, the EDC began developing a vision and high-level goals for economic development in North Bend, consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and branding guidelines. And those goals and vision are reflected on page 6 of the Economic Development Action Plan. In 2021, the EDC also completed a SWOT analysis, or strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, outlining many of the primary issues and opportunities relevant to economic development in North Bend. These items, including the goals and the vision and the SWOT analysis, were presented to City Council by the previous chair of the EDC, Corrine Wilson, in April of 2022. And on June 7th, 2022, Council approved a contract and scope of work with Place and Main advisors to assist the city in developing an Economic Development Action Plan. In late June and July, and as indicated by the green bubble on the slide, 6 focus groups were held with a total of 24 individual participants representing small business owners, commercial property owners, developers, and local and regional stakeholders, including the Snow Valley Chamber of Commerce, North Bend Downtown Foundation, among others. In addition, during the summer of 2022, Place and Main completed data analysis, including updates to demographic and retail leakage data that had previously been collected in the 2018 economic profile. And this is included in the appendix of the Economic Development Action Plan. On November 29th, 2022, Place and Main presented the data analysis at a joint City Council EDC work study meeting and identified Council's priorities and input on primary challenges facing North Bend's economic development ecosystem. As a result of the outcomes of the stakeholder outreach, data analysis, and the joint EDC Council workshop, Place in Maine identified primary economic development challenges and opportunities in North Bend and developed a list of actionable strategies or recommendations that one, align with the plan's visions and goals, address challenges identified throughout the planning process, and aim to pursue long-term economic health for the city. The draft action plan was presented to City Council at a subsequent work study on February 14th, 2023, Valentine's Day. Following minor updates to the plan based on council feedback, draft plan was shared with community stakeholders and the public for review and comment beginning on March 13th. March 28th, the EDC recommended the City Council approve the Economic Development Action Plan. So since the start of 2022, there have been a total of 11 Economic Development Commission meetings and 4 City Council agenda items or work studies focused on the Economic Development Action Plan. Following discussion and eventual approval, staff will continue working in partnership with key stakeholders, implementation partners, and City Council to update the economic development element, the comprehensive plan, and pursue work programs and resources that align with the recommendations identified in the Economic Development Action Plan and the subsequent economic development element of the comp plan. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's a lot of process time and engagement. Also clarifying questions. Ms. Colon.
Who are the key stakeholders?
So leading into this process, we identified a number of stakeholders in the community, which included small business owners, it included commercial property owners, it included residential developers, and included some of those organizations that we anticipate will help us implement some of these recommendations, such as the Downtown Foundation and the Snow Valley Chamber of Commerce.
Also, who, when you say implementation partners, who are they and what does that mean?
So in the Economic Development Action Plan, under the strategies, you'll notice a section with key partners under each one. A lot of these recommendations are not items that city staff could do on their own and require the assistance of outside organizations. Again, examples of those would be the Downtown Foundation and the Snow Valley Chamber of Commerce, among others.
Mr. This, because it's been such a long time, I actually have a couple of questions I want to be sure I'm clear on. You said how much public input was solicited for this plan and how was the public input received?
So the primary public input was during June and July of last year. We held 6 different focus groups that were attended by a total of 24 individuals, again, representing those small business owners, commercial property owners, and developers. Those same individuals that were involved in those focus groups had the opportunity to review the draft plan, which we posted online and through our social media and in our business newsletter in March. And in addition, throughout this process, we've held approximately quarterly business outreach meetings, and we've engaged the individuals that showed up at those meetings in this process as well.
What does this plan commit the city to?
There's nothing binding associated with this Economic Development Action Plan. These are simply policy recommendations that have come out of the engagement that we've done with the community and with the stakeholders, the engagement with City Council, and we hope to carry these recommendations forward into our economic development element, the comprehensive plan. But this Economic Development Action Plan, there's nothing binding with this plan doesn't lead to any zoning changes or codify anything in our municipal code.
And I'm correct, it's essentially two parts. There's findings, which is essentially the data that was gathered, the information from the consultant, and then the set of recommendations for the staff and council to take into consideration further. Is that the essence of this?
Yes, I would concur with that.
Mr. Rosen.
What does this do? You said it doesn't give a whole list of things that it does not do. What does this do?
Well, so this was again started with a city council recommendation to staff and the EDC to develop a strategy for our city in terms of developing an economic development ecosystem. So, this was an opportunity to do a lot of data collection and analysis, update our economic profile from 2018. So looking at that demographic and retail leakage data and making sure that that is updated post-pandemic. So we were able to collect some trends between 2017, 2018 and 2021, 2022. And then it also engaged our community, especially those implementation partners and key stakeholders, like the business owners and commercial property developers, to understand what some of the key issues and challenges that they were facing, and then provided a set of recommendations based upon that data analysis and the outreach that we did, try to address those challenges that we identified.
So heavy data. Sounds like a lot of this was acquiring data to come up with recommendations. That data available to us, have it here.
So the data I'm referring to is the appendix of the Economic Development Action Plan. So yes, that should be included in the council packet.
Anyone else? Mr. Rosen, do you want me to pause?
Oh.
All right. With that then, Ms. Miller. Introduce, excuse me, I may back up from that, move to public comment. Is there anyone here in council chambers wishing to speak on this agenda item? Please come forward. Got to take a choice here. Yep, there's one. Gonna have more than one tonight. Who are you?
Garcia, 770 Southeast 10th, North Bend, Washington, 98045. I had emailed Mr. Knoll previously. I appreciate the time and effort that went into this. A lot of work has been done, and I do recall that the council at one point in time had asked for this. I think that, I guess my issue with this, and I expressed this in my email to Mr. Knoll, was I don't think this is what entirely the citizens of North Bend desire, is a economic plan that's pretty reliant on tourism. The everyday person doesn't really want coming to North Bend or housing. I appreciate that that's what the business owners might want, but they're a hard minority to the citizens of North Bend, which I don't think would want.
You?
Hi, my name is Wendy Parslow. I live at 416 Taylor Place Northeast in North Bend, and I'm a member of the Economic Development Commission, the longest standing member. I've been on it for, 6 or 7 years. And I just wanted to emphasize something that I think is really powerful about this plan. It's two things. One, we introduced the word action into it because we really wanted to say, what are the actions that we can take? So that question of like, what does this plan do? It actually takes a lot of information and says, we're going through this information and this is what we're recommending that we do with this information. And this is the focus areas that we want to look at when we make decisions about the future of our city. So that was one. And then secondarily, I thought was really powerful is that we recognize is that we're not only in this by ourselves. We're a community. And so that means that we have stakeholders at the table and people coming alongside. It's not just the city doing it as well. And so I thought that was really another powerful part of the plan, is it identified other community organizations and groups to come alongside it as well. So, and as someone who's seen the evolution of how we've looked at economic development with North Bend quite a few years and been a part of the brand guidelines that we developed quite a few years ago, it's really great to be able to see the evolution of like, now it's like, what are we going to do about it? And I feel like this plan is a great representation of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in chambers? Do we have anyone online?
No one online.
You? I'll turn to Ms. Miller for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion to approve AB 23-047, approving the Economic Development Action Plan.
You do have a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Cohen. Ms. Miller, would you like to speak to it?
I'm going to hold my thoughts for just a moment. I'm going to open it up to the floor if anyone else wants to make a comment at this time.
Olin, you would have the next meeting. Anyone else? Mr. Rosen.
First of all, to clarify, and did a horrible job of seeing the question, was the raw data, the interview results and questions that were asked, and that was my fault. I did not express that clearly. Let me talk about what's in front of us tonight and where my concerns lie. The economic development plan itself, by and large, I think is fantastic. I don't have a problem with it. What I have a problem with is, we'll use one of the terms I think we use here is like leakage. Somehow we have a lot of housing elements that have entered into this. And they're actionable items, it appears to be, direction and so forth. I can go through that in a moment. And it's the housing portion that I am concerned with, because I don't believe the council is fully done, is fully completed their process. I believe there's a lot more input that is needed from council. I think the council needs more information before it starts to make decisions on housing. Housing is going to determine what our city looks like. This is a huge issue. It is such a big issue that it has its own specific element in the comprehensive plan. There is no doubt that housing is part of economic development. Wouldn't deny that. It is such an important part that it has its own element. I would personally would have wished to have seen this address it as such, that housing is important, is part of economic development, and it needs to be addressed separately. And my concern is, as I mentioned, it is throughout the document, and that is I don't believe the council has really fully vetted that policy. I don't think we're in agreement on where we want to go with housing process. And I'm going to make my comments only about the housing portion, because I think the economic portion, which is majority of this, is great, done well. I appreciate it. I would like to approve it, but want the housing portions out of it so we can continue as a council to discuss it with the housing elements. And that's the part I'm concerned, and that's what I'll address. Council's had two looks at that. We had a joint meeting with the Planning Commission. It was held an hour before a council meeting, 14 members, I believe 7 commissioners, 7 council members. About 15 minutes at the end of the presentation to discuss. Not sufficient. Then we had an incredibly long work study that went, I think, past 10 o'clock, where at the end of that meeting, we were led to believe that we would have another opportunity to take a look at it. We would get back with some data, and some options. That kind of caught me off guard when I saw this tonight. I thought we still had that opportunity coming up to discuss this at study. Some of the issues in here, I did bring this up to staff. Staff is aware of some of my concerns. We talk about specifically on page 48 of the packet, increasing housing opportunities. What does that mean? It says various price ranges and housing types. Are we talking multi-million-dollar condos? What are we talking about? Clarification, because we are ultimately voting and approving this packet here tonight. And some of the things in here, I don't fully understand. Talks about on page 55, pursue recommendations included in a housing needs action plan that has not even yet been completed. So how can we approve that? And going to page 58, talks about creating attainable and affordable housing. I'm not sure what the definition of attainable is. So before I approve these things, I feel I need to know that information. Once again, the economic portion looks great. Housing, I wish get that out of it. And that's my concern. With that, I would like to see us do maybe one or two things. Council, please weigh in. We could either proceed, pass our housing elements, and then come back to this since we'll have whatever or discussed our housing needs, or remove some of the housing stuff from here, reference it with a simple, you understand housing is part of economic development, and we'll address it as a separate element, which it is going to be addressed. Those are my two thoughts on ways to pull it out. I think the most important thing that I can say tonight is, once again, about housing. It's here, I didn't expect it to be, is council's vision needs to be addressed. I think the council hasn't had the question posed. What is your vision, North? I think as a council, we need to come together. 7 of us, we're going to have 7 very different opinions. But we need to get together on that. The compromises, obviously, in debates. We need to express that vision to staff so that you can come about, put these elements together, especially on housing, and that you can move forward knowing that this is where the council sits on these issues. I hate for staff to continue to do work and then council sends you in a completely different direction. That's not fair of you and your time. I understand that. So that question hasn't been asked. We've been given presentations. We've been asked if you have any questions. But we have not been asked, what is your vision, council? You're the legislative body. What do you want to see for North Bend as we move forward? I think we need to answer that before we can do much more with housing and do that. Ms. Oliron.
Thank you. What else? God help.
Yeah, I do recall some of the work study, and I recall that they were going to come back with more data. I am concerned, just like Jonathan, on the housing side of it, and a lot of the data that we asked in the work study, I really thought it was going to come back before us with the updated data or the data that we originally asked for in that work study. I have a tough time moving this forward without having that data or that explained that was asked in the original work.
Pause there, turn to council, or excuse me, turn to staff.
Yeah, I think there might be some confusion on the data returning through the housing action plan versus the economic development plan. I think we are still to bring the information. We've clarified some of the information by defining where it came from a little clearer as was requested at the work study for both plans.
So the housing action plan, which has also been in front of council, you're saying in a work study, is that right?
It has come before a work study. It will come back to council at a meeting, but we'll discuss it then to whether you guys want to refer it back to another work.
And one of the questions that I heard essentially, I think from Mr. Rosen, has to do with is this economic development and directing action on housing?
I think what it's doing is it's acknowledging that there is a challenge with housing in North Bend. This was identified as a goal to address increased housing opportunity from the Economic Development Commission. That was based upon their conversations with the community. I do want to ensure that everybody is clear that those goals, including that housing goal, were presented to City Council back in April of 2022, so a year ago. so this should not come as a surprise to city council. But all that this economic development action plan doing is it acknowledging that it is a challenge that we've heard through our focus groups and through the conversations with stakeholders. And there's no specific items regarding housing strategy, except to say we know that there is a concurrent housing needs action plan taking place, and that the specific recommendations geared toward housing will come from that housing needs action plan, not this economic development plan.
If I'm understanding you correctly, to one of Mr. Rosen's prime questions, housing needs study, which is not complete. This economic development plan says, look to that study, which is still coming to council for their decision. Mr. Rosen?
Yep. Does this plan not, correct me if I'm wrong, start to set work plans and policy guidance we move forward? Is that not one of the goals of these type of reports, is to set work plans and give us policy guidance?
The work planning would be a next step following approval of this economic development action plan. However, none of the recommendations speak to housing, except to say that, as the mayor pointed out, look to the housing needs action plan for next steps on related to housing.
That's cool.
Is it impossible to move forward with this economic plan and remove the housing portion for now?
Dave.
Thanks. If you want to be real specific about answering questions, if you look on page 58, starts with 1 through, I believe, about 12 specific actions that are recommended. Councilmember Rosen, you asked what does it recommend that we do? You'll find that on those pages, and specifically with the issue of housing, there are 2 places in the document it's mentioned. One on page 48 under goals, it says, increase housing opportunity. There's a variety of housing types and prices and ranges to make North Bend more livable. So the second thing it says is when you go to page 58, there is an action, which is action number 3. And this is the specifics we're talking about. So I think it's important we read them, and if we have a problem with them, we deal with them. And that is action number 3, partner with public, private, and nonprofit sectors to assist in solving housing challenges related to workforce and affordability. Pursuing partnerships and funding opportunities to create attainable and affordable housing opportunities in North Bend is vital to making sure that those who work in the city can afford to live in the city. The city's concurrent housing action plan and needs assessment, expected completion in mid-2023, will look to address this issue and create new housing options for all segments of the city. So those are specifically verbatim, the 2 references. And what those do, if you do not believe that we need to increase housing opportunity, you probably should remove that. Or if you don't believe that we should partner with folks, you should probably remove that. But it really doesn't set forth a specific program for addressing it. It says work with certain stakeholders to make more affordable housing for workforce housing. And the reason that we address that is, I believe, probably 4 years ago, Mayor and I established a group of business folks to start talking to us about what the business community was concerned with in terms of the city's operation. You'll note that we brought you a bunch of code changes. We brought a lot of their concerns to you, and one of their biggest concerns, and we heard it at every meeting, was increase affordable housing opportunities because we can't stay open without employees. So I don't think we're overreaching by saying we're reflecting what the stakeholders told us and trying to respond to it. Now, certainly it's possible to take this out, come back and amend it when we finish the housing portion of the element. That's eminently possible. But I think it's important just to say, do we, and I'm very interested in the council's position in terms of whether you feel this is a laudable or a goal that you want to work toward. It doesn't commit you to anything specific, but it says you think it's important. And it doesn't commit you to a program, but it commits us, all of us, working with those people that can help us solve it, present a solution. That's all we're doing here. So I'm very interested in your vision in this area because we're putting a lot of effort into it. So I'd like to hear how you feel about that. We certainly have the opportunity to take it out and come back when we've done more work. But I don't see this as tremendously threatening. It's just, it's aspirations. It's what do we want? What approach would you like us to concentrate on? Because we can't do the housing ourselves. We need the expert to solve the problem. And we need to continue to talk to the stakeholders, make sure we're meeting the need that they want. So that's what our response is about.
Mr. Miller, would you just cite the 2 page numbers once again?
Beg your pardon? 48. Yeah, 48 was the first and 58 was the other page.
Thank you.
So the goals on 48, it's number 3. And on 58, if you look at action number 3, that is the action that talks about our actionable commitment.
And to be clear, partners like Habitat for Humanity, working with them to apply for grants or working with them to bring affordable housing to the city. Those are the kind of partners that this is saying we would help work with them to create that housing.
I think it was earlier I asked the question in here, attainable housing. I have a rough idea what affordable housing is, and I think most folks on this council are very supportive of that. And once again, we will address this in our housing element. It's attainable housing. Is that $1 million condo stretching all the way down North Bend Way? What is this? And that's me setting a goal, an action here, something that I'm not clear on. I'm being asked tonight to vote on something. I could not find the definition of attainable housing, and I don't understand what that will lead to. That's why I want to get clarification on things like that before we move forward. Once again, is this another way to get at missing middle, which we've talked about many times in the past? And there was actually reluctance on the part of the council to do that. So are we talking about condos? Or are we talking about $1 million condos? Or are we talking about $600,000 housing? I don't know. I couldn't find that clarification in here. I agree with Mr. Miller. Yes, this is right. You got the 2 pages that I was looking at as well. You're spot on. That's exactly where my concerns lie. And I referenced that in my remarks. There's others on page 60 as well, talk about redevelopment and so forth. But what I don't want to do is start to go each item, but what I'm trying to do by pointing out is there's others, it's scattered throughout. And that's why I want to see us deal with housing separately rather than piecemeal tonight, because it's distracting from the economic element, which I think we mostly, for all of us, probably support. And I don't have a problem with it. But when we start putting these things in here without having guidance from council, I do get concerned. And I don't think council has given guidance on what we want to see throughout the city as far as housing yet. That is something that we look forward to having a conversation with staff on. So thank you. Appreciate you letting me go on and on tonight.
Mr. Rose and Ms. Cullen.
I just want to speak to the elephant in the room when we talk about attainable, affordable housing. And I think, I don't want to speak for my fellow council members, but I think the worry is 5-story, 6-story apartments all over North Bend and turning us into mini Issaquah or Little Izzy. And I know that we need to find more diverse ways, not just having $1 million homes and townhomes, because that's all we have, mobile homes, something else. But speaking for myself, I'm worried about high-rise buildings.
Thank you. Scott Howe.
Yeah, I agree. All these items are great and that, getting stakeholders involved is important. But I think it is premature to have the staff go out and define these items or look for these until we've developed a plan of what the council wants to see moving forward. So as you tell me that this is something you want to go out and action, I get more concerned that it's in this plan because you should not be actioning anything until such time as council weighs in. Going forward is what we would like to see. I just think it would be a waste of staff time and a waste of our partners until we as council agree on what we want to see moving forward.
Ms. Miller.
I am sensing a lot of confusion here at this table and a lot of conversations yet to be had. I'm thinking that potentially if we are open to this, maybe pushing this commentary, this subject matter another month out. So those who need their answers more defined have that time to talk to staff and work through complications or whatever consequences that may come from actions we are not sure that we're actually having. So if that made any sense. I open that up to my council members next to me to see if that might be of interest at all.
Ms. Cohen.
I like the idea of keeping this plan going as is and removing the housing options possible, getting back to it after we do the housing action plan and then putting it back in at that point. David Miller said maybe amending it possible.
Mr. Elwood.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd agree with that. And I just want to support my colleagues up here and give a little bit more context as to the confusion that you articulated. It was on that meeting where we had two different consultants talking about two different topics. The trouble was they were using the same sources and they had competing data. And in that meeting, we made it very clear that it was confusing. I mean, it went till 10 o'clock that night. And there were there's certain rationale for why we needed clarity. For example, I had asked a couple questions, specifically what's the number of seniors in the populations from the housing needs or from the housing perspective? Like how many seniors are actually in there? What's that demographic breakdown? I also asked other questions when we were looking at specifically how many people work in North Bend that don't live in North Bend. It was restricted to the city limits. Now, we all know I know people that work at Safeway that live at Wilderness Rim, for example. Those people would not be counted in that particular data point. So what it sounds like is that there are so many people that work in North Bend but don't actually live in North Bend, even though I would consider Wilderness Rim, even though it's not within city limits, still within city area, right? So there was a lot of key details that were missing in that meeting. And so that's where the confusion comes when we have same sources being used, but they had different data points. It was interesting. Same charts in some examples, and they had different data points. And then we're asking for this to come back with clarification of data. We had a whole litany of different things, like a couple of the details that I just said, that would help us understand. So when it comes forward tonight in the economic development plan, which I acknowledge all the hard work that went into it, and there's a lot of great action items in here, you start seeing housing being referenced in there, it does spook us in that regard, right? I understand there's no direct action being taken from this, but there is, right? I believe you said that you're going to start putting more policy discussions in place as to what's going to come to us from this particular plan. So what that tells me is that there's work coming from this. So where I start going with my questions are, well, what's the prioritization here? How are you ranking your bandwidth, your resources, your level of effort that you're putting forth into doing something with this plan? Housing like top, it was the #1 challenge in the plan that you presented, yet it was like item number 6 on the action item, which just simply says, as Mr. Miller pointed out, look to some other outside sources to help them find funding, but we'll review this later in June when we have the housing needs assessment. So I just wanted to add a little bit more context as to why you're sensing or seeing the obvious here, which is we're confused and a little bit shaken up by this. That's why. And so there's just competing data. We need some clarity. That's all. I would support the housing piece being either removed or even having it more clearly detailed in there that this will be taken up at another date once the housing needs assessment is completed, there's things going through Washington State right now. There's a lot of different, the PSRC, there's a lot of things happening right now that could weigh in or influence that. And so if we had a time certain that we put in there, that's a different thing. But I just wanted to support my colleagues' fusion here. I mean, that was my takeaway as well. I would support some sort of amendment to the economic development plan as is, but we passed the plan with that housing piece amended.
Thank you. I think I want to express, and I will for staff, either of the notions being floated to trim what's in this plan and pass it, or to just delay the passage. That's fine. We don't have any particular, rush to putting this forward. I think what I usually am looking for is what will change, what is something that's different here. Yes, one path that says we don't speak about housing, as Mr. Rosen acknowledged, pretty hard to talk about economic development and ignore housing. So it doesn't seem that stripping this plan, any word housing, is the right choice. But then it comes at least to the two items being spoken to. And I guess I read them quite differently than a few of the council members are, because I don't see them actually driving any particular action other than saying, when you figured out what you want to do for housing, you need to work with public, private, and nonprofits in regard to what's on 58. I think what was on 48 was even more benign, of saying we need greater diversity of housing. And so particular to that one, I would put it to council, because that is, for me, both of those statements are really asking council, do you support the diversity of housing? Do you support that we should work with public, private, and nonprofit sectors, not in the specific, but in the general? And that does tell the staff, yes, these are our expectations, so that we have a direction as we're looking at housing action plan, knowing what we should be thinking of putting together. So to me, it's kind of a little bit of a chicken and egg to stay, if we're not giving direction on the expectations, that seems a little odd to me. So I just want to throw that out there for thought, and then any other comments, and then I'm certainly willing to take any motion that you're looking for.
In the comment and in the staff, they made the comments that actions would be taken on it and they would move forward, and plans would be moved forward on this. So I don't think it's the council just saying it's not going to get done. We've seen items where we, take a look at it and all of a sudden we find items coming forward that we didn't expect. And I really think what we're trying to do is make sure that as a staff, we're not moving forward on items that have not been approved by the council or want to see items move forward. I think part of the housing is what is driving this discussion, either removing it or tabling this to another night.
Well, actually, what you said, I agree. And the question is, do we agree with this? Do we agree with that? It's a question we haven't been asked. We haven't weighed in on. And I think you'll find that, yes, we certainly agree. I think probably speak for most of us that affordable housing is a problem and an issue that we agree that we have to. Attainable housing, sure what that means. Partnerships, yeah, let's talk about that. Those are conversations I think the council absolutely wants to have and get you answers for those questions. It wasn't posed to us yet, and I'm sure that'll come up in the housing conversation. I'm confident that's part of it. And that is, you are right. We do need to answer those questions so staff has direction. And I think we want to do just what you're asking. Don't think we've had that opportunity, and I don't think on the fly doing it here tonight is the best way. I think we usually do our worst work when we start to try to change things on the fly.
That I would fully agree with.
Yes, I told you, there's actually some common ground. So I agree that we do need to answer those questions. The staff knows what we want and what we would like to see. And I think this council certainly wants to sit down and figure all that out. I think that out. We have an obligation to do that.
Ms. Miller, I'm going to look back to you. This was your motion. We can call the question, take a vote as it stands. We can move to table. We can look for, I'm hearing conversation around removing, at least 2 statements, but no motion as such. So I'm going to look to you to decide where you want to go.
I'm going to go to a motion to push this, remand this till the next May 15th meeting, so we can have better clarity for those who are needing it and a better decision-making process through it. Fine.
And so
need to say that a little differently. However.
Well, I wanted to be sure what I heard. I heard remand to the May 16th meeting. Okay. And that would be not that you're withdrawing your previous motion and making that motion. Does that sound right, Mr. Kenyon?
The motion to essentially table would take.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a second? So the motion, then the motion in before you is to remand to CED committee.
Hold on.
To make, well, yeah, and only deal with the motion at a time. Remand.
I'm going to be hanging out to dry here.
Remand this item, CED committee, or excuse me, to the May 16th City Council meeting. That is the motion that's made.
Thank you.
I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rosen. Now, I think we understand why you're making that motion. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity. We'll have a work study in between now and then. Let's talk about it there. Some direction, hopefully, to staff that we can move forward. Sounds good. Just a general thought. I think there's enough room on our next work study that we can at least discuss this briefly. We want to go about.
That was my concern, is logistically is May 16th. We do something like a work study.
There is one work study in between. I'll have to discuss with staff what we toss or consolidate to do this, but that's certainly possible.
And I think that's in order for us to move this forward instead of, just pulling it out, famous or city administrator or somebody I really respect. They said they want to work towards getting a yes. I would hope that we would be able to all work together to get to a yes versus this situation and giving not just remanding it, bring it back the same way next month would not be getting to a yes.
Well, not if we didn't get any additional input. No, that'd be kind of a waste of a month. Okay. Anything else? All right. So the motion before you is to remand this issue to the May 16th City Council meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll have one nay, Mr. Loudenbach. Motion carries. Okay, Council, let me see if I can even find the agenda again. I've been thrown off ever since my granddaughter left. It's just the tenor of the meeting went right downhill after that. I was pleased that she left because she'd have probably come up here and kicked a couple of you in the shins. Oh, that wasn't fair. Item number 7. Oh, it might have been me. Where are we? Item number 7, AB 23-048. This is a resolution adopting procurement policy and procedures. Mr. Gold.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to read this, not all of it, but the majority of it is a little bit wordy, but I think it's important to understand. Build this. Purpose of the procurement policy to be established is to reduce costs, increase efficiencies, ensure compliance, policies, laws, and regulations, and establish/improve internal controls. City staff is presenting a new procurement policy replacing the current one that is approved by council in 1998 ordinance 037. Purchasing policy is one page document. New proposed policy is 20 pages. It is now out of date and does not promote cities woefully out of date as in comparable cities by budget, weights, and hopefully out of date, as in ensuring compliance with laws, regulations, and policies. The new policy prepared using 4 comparable cities at budget size. Cities of Monroe, Woodinville, Snoqualmie, and Snohomish used as guides in certain sections. For example, one significant section is spending authority. Staff realizes and has experienced that the city of North Bend's policy is inefficient in this section due to the low spending authority amount for the mayor, the administrative and department head. This has caused numerous delays on time-sensitive projects and is counter to increasing efficiencies and reducing costs. Requested spending authority of up to $50,000 for the mayor designee is in line with the 4 cities mentioned above. So we have there is a $25,000 amount for spending authority that was approved or actually recommended by the Finance and Administration Committee, and we did change policy to reflect that. I have also researched the purchasing or buying power of $7,500 in 1998 versus 2023. I thought it was important to know. The number that was come up with, and I didn't put this out, it was on a website that I went to, was $3,880 based on inflationary trends over the past 25 years. City's 2023 budget exceeds $100 million, whereas in 1998 it was just over $13 million. Mark Rigos researched the cost of preparing agenda bills that were required to go to the council for approval for costs less than $50,000 2023, and this will be the first quarter. And below is his findings, basically saying the average cost is about $1,500 for an agenda bill. And even though only 2 exceeded that process, if we didn't have the $50,000 policy amount, authority, that it would cost the city $3,000. That does not support increasing efficiencies or ensuring or reducing costs. So furthermore, Councilmember Rosen asked me to gather some comparisons of local smaller cities in King and Snohomish counties. And there's a table of what I found. You can see that it shows Newcastle, Duval, Pacific, Sultan, and Carnation. Budget for all those highest budgets are for Duval, Sultan of $65 million. And the spending authority is $25,000 for Newcastle, which is lower. Their budget is, and $25,000 for Carnation, but the others are 10 and 55,000 as well. Staff is requesting approval of this new procurement policy to continue the city's effort maintaining best practices, reducing costs, and increasing efficiencies, as well as staying current with policies, laws, and regulations. Current purchasing policy will be removed by the new ordinance. City administrator will be presenting council later on. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about too was I used the word best practices in there, and I've been using that since I came here. It's important to understand the focus of this, the actual scope, is a best practice. All policies that are in the finance department or any department, best practices to promote efficiencies, cost reductions, and legal compliance and internal controls, which are all important areas when you put it by the state. You're doing business to the best of your ability.
Thank you. Council questions, clarifying questions before we move to public comment. Mr. Godhill.
I'd like to know how we came up with a cost of $3,000. If we were going, when we take a look at most of these items are under the 25,000. We're saying that if it costs us $3,000 more.
Just the question.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So the question was, and I don't know what the 3,000.
I understand. So you want to know how we would have lost $3,000? Well, there's a list of 8 agenda bills that Rigos had to bring to the council for spending authority. So number 2, $32,758, and number 4, $32,637. All the rest would be under the proposed $25,000. We're saying go with the $25,000, city is basically loses $3,000. We didn't have the $50,000 limit. That's not running a best practice because we're looking at that times 4 quarters, averaging it out, and you're talking. That makes sense.
Mr. Godolph, I think your question is, how was the cost of an agenda bill determined, the $1,500?
The 3,000, yeah. I'm trying to understand where you, I mean, I get you've got 2 items on here that were over the limit. One of which I think we could have a purchasing agreement because it should be an ongoing, we're going to use it. The other I understand, but you know, there are, you know, I think it's.
How was the administrative cost determined? That's the question.
I mean, you're the one that.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know the $3,000 thought up.
I think it's because it's referring to 2 bills versus one.
2 agenda items don't fall in.
Okay. You know, I just took a stab at that $1,500 amount. That's just based on my time, app time, city attorney time, clerk time, committee time. Person's got 15 minutes here, half hour there. All of a sudden you've got a bunch of hours, and based on charge rate and so forth, our attorneys charge rate's quite high. It's $300 per hour. So hour of time. It's just an average too, right? It's some might be more, some might be less, but it is probably about average to fall on.
It's essentially administrative processing. Any other clarifying questions? None. We'll turn to the public. If you are a member of the public wishing to speak on this agenda item here in City Chambers, please move forward to the podium. Seeing no one rushing. Do we have anyone online?
No one online.
Thank you. Finance and Administration, Mr. Godolph.
Before I make the motion, does this motion determine the number? And there's no number in here as to what the
That's a good question, and frankly, it reminded me that I had a few questions of my own.
That's a good point of order, because it is in the document itself. Later on, it's bolded, but I agree the motion itself should be discussed.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I wanted to, I believe I heard you say that this, Richard, but I understand the document that is attached does reflect the Finance and Administration's recommendation at $25,000 limit.
I did put those areas in bold, and we did change that recommendation.
As a point of order, could I then still put that number into the motion to verify, make it clear that no, getting the shake, no. Because I see there's different, we talk 50,000, we talk everything else. I want to make it clear the motion that I would be bringing forward is for the 25,000.
And that's what's in the packet. Yeah, if we've answered that, yeah, I just wanted to reemphasize, because I think this has been a little bit of confusing. So again, between the 25 and the 50. So if I'm correct, proposal to council that the finance department made based on the survey and best practices was for $50,000 for items approved in the budget by council. Right. And that the Finance and Administration's recommendation was to reduce that to 25. We've already gone over how we got to the calculated average administrative cost. Appreciate that. And this 50 versus 25, if I am I correct that was the only change came out of Finance Administration. Thank you. Okay.
Your Honor, I guess my concern goes, we put in here the requested spending authority up to 50,000 from the mayor for Stesnay in line with 4 cities mentioned. There is also an option for 25,000 based upon Finance and Administration's recommendation. I'm trying to figure out where we dictate.
Where are you reading that?
I'm reading that on the motion, on your summary statement.
I'm reading a motion that says, am I reading the wrong motion?
No, Your Honor. In the summary statement, it's just been, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gould, but I think the summary statement has just been recycled. And it's in the actual document where the edits have been made to be $25,000. So the summary statement is just telling the journey that it was once 50,000 according to the finance department's recommendation. It came through our committee. We recommended 25,000. So Mr. Gould is just trying to capture that in the summary statement, but the summary statement is not the actual procurement policy that we're adopting.
The actual motion is just to approve the AB, a resolution adopting a new procurement policy and procedures.
Correct. And if you go,
that would be the one attached.
And through the mayor, if we look at page 106, that we number it in the staff report, it's really page 18 of the document. You look at your page 106 under section 4.3.3, mayor, says the mayor may execute change orders provided that the cumulative change orders do not exceed 25,000.
Yes, and I'll extend to Mr. Miller's point. If you continue scrolling, you'll see Mr. Gould has bolded $25,000 throughout the sections with appropriate titles and spending caps.
Thank you. I was just confused by the summary.
Okay, Scott Health, would you please make the motion?
I will. Thank you. Clarifying that. A motion to approve AB 23-048, resolution adopting a new procurement policy procedure.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second by Mr. Elwood. Mr. Godhelf, anything to add to that?
No, I think we've discussed that ad nauseum.
Mr. Elwood.
Thank you. And I appreciate staff's patience on working with us on this. We all recognized, just for on the record on the committee level, we all recognized that in 1998, 1996 cap was way outdated and it needed to be improved. We appreciated staff's recommendation of $50,000. We also appreciated the comparing with other cities. We did have some debate, and I'll just speak from my point of view. It's important to know what other communities do, but I also don't think it's the primary reason why we would make a shift. So when we looked at some of the data, it's also in the packet that Mr. Rigos had put together, and you average it out, it's about $25,000 for the last quarter. So the 25,000, all of our gut checks were in that $25,000 range. So when you actually look at some of the data, we're getting at that $25,000 range. Staff was fine with that $25,000 range. There are some other anomalies that were pushing that figure up, just snow plow gear and things like that. And so since this is a first leap of going from 7,000 or whatever it is to 25,000, baby stepping it with some real data. And so I think the staff and the committee worked well to get to this number. So I hope it. Thank you.
Someone else, Mr. Rosen.
Appreciate fellow council members looking at this. Certainly I'll defer to you guys. You spent the time and the research. I do want to point something out, like item number 4, the AB to purchase more ice slicer, 42,637. I think this is actually a positive. And what I mean by that is it helps for council to see purchases sometimes, see that policy that we've talked about has actually happened. Sometimes we'll say, hey, you know what, we want to do better with snow removal is the best example because it's come up so often. And here it is, we're going to approve 42,000 for ice slice. So we're seeing that some of the things we've asked for are actually happening. When we don't see those items, they get purchased, yes, but I think some of us will lose track of, hey, did they get more ice slicer? Did they actually get that snow plow? So I see it as a positive, sometimes coming back to council, letting us know what's going on, keeping us up to date on the purchases, and also allowing the community to see that, hey, we are being responsive on some of these issues. So I don't see it as a negative. And I appreciate the fellow council members at committee level taking this back and taking a second look at it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve AB 23-048, resolution adopting a new procurement policy and procedures. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. It is unanimous. Following right on the heels of that one, we have item number 8, AB 23-049. This is an ordinance repealing North Bend Municipal Code 3.3.0, purchasing And I suspect we'll be a little quicker on this one. Mr. Miller, you're taking this?
Yes, council and mayor, I get to play cleanup on this one, and it's real complicated. It's on 111 of your packet, and this is merely the ordinance that changed the municipal code to reflect what you just voted.
Be pretty clear. Any clarifying questions? Looking to City Hall audience, if you would like to speak on this item, please move to the podium. And seeing no one rushing, do we have anyone online?
No one online.
Thank you. I'll distract her when she's trying to respond to me. Mr. Godhelf.
Yes, thank you for that clarifying discussion on the motion here. Motion to approve AB 23.49, an ordinance repealing North Bend Municipal Code, Chapter 3.30, purchasing, the first and final reading.
Thank you. And second by Mr. Elwood. Anything you'd like to add?
No, it puts into motion what the last motion we had or agenda item, and seems like a housekeeping at this point.
It's housekeeping at this point. Mr. Elwood, anyone else? Motion is to approve AB 23-049, an ordinance repealing North Bend Municipal Code, Chapter 3.30, purchasing as a first and final reading. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. It is unanimous. Thank you. Fastest piece tonight. Right. And Easter resistance of the evening. We are to item number 9. AB 23-050. This is a resolution authorizing an agreement for wholesale water supply. I'll mention that wholesale water supply is between the City of North Bend and the Salal Water Association. I'm gonna, because this has been quite a time and quite a something I've been deeply involved in, I'm going to lead off. And then we'll be turning to Mr. Kenyon for some detail. And then following Mr. Kenyon's detail presentation by Grant and Osborne. So with that, excuse me, I've got, I apologize to my seatmate here. I apparently, my granddaughter's visit, she brought me a nice present in the form of a new cold. I thought I'd wait until now when I was starting to clog up. All right. With the levity out of the way, the city Salal water supply agreement, essentially a partnership, ensures that every property owner, every resident, every business has access to water. It is an essential right and expectation. To be clear, this is a 180-degree difference from those who speak against it, that are essentially saying, I have mine, and don't want you to have what they have. There are also those who say, slow down, you're rushing into this agreement. I find that, quite frankly, laughable. I personally have spent countless hours over the last 3 years working with Salal board members to negotiate a mutually beneficial agreement. More so, the water sharing agreement has been in discussion for the better part of 16 years on and off between the city and Salal. Few are saying that this agreement doesn't help the river, while at the same time declaring that they want to use all the water they want, whenever they want, regardless of the river. What? Or that there will be less water for Salal users because their use will be restricted. Don't be fooled. They don't care about the health of the river. It is a smokescreen by those whose real agenda is not allowing their property owners have what they have, a home in our community. This agreement is positive in many ways, including from an environmental point, because the city is proactively addressing water conservation and therefore being mindful of continued climate change. While Hobo Springs has and is expected to continue to be a fully reliable source, we will now have both redundancy and additional mitigation water needed to mitigate Snoqualmie River when it is low. From an emergency standpoint, when, not if, an earthquake or similar catastrophe results in a major water main break, the improved infrastructure resiliency with the interties will allow the two water purveyors to transfer water, which will result in residents receiving water more quickly than they likely otherwise would. It is equitable for all. Many property owners in the combined water service areas would now be assured of access to public water wherein they currently do not have that. And it also completes a technical checkmark for the city's agreement with the Department of Ecology, known as the right of examination, or the ROE, for a backup source, a second mitigation water source. For Salal, gives them a new source of water, contracted from the city's water rights, that allows them to fully meet their obligations under state law, making available water to all property owners in their service area. Meeting that obligation was the essence of the recent moratorium since lifted. From a financial standpoint, current city residents who pay sewer and/or water bills, because the upgrade and replacement financing model for paying for these facilities relies in part on the city impact fees from commercial development applications generated by new businesses for a large portion of those costs, without which existing customers will have to pay the shortage. This is also true for Salal customers, because Salal will be able to accept new members and collect general facilities charges, which in turn can reduce the scale of future rate increases based on their existing Salal members. It's good from an economic perspective, from an environmental perspective, from a legal rights perspective. It is a good solution, maintains Salal an independent business, while both meeting public requirements as water districts. With that opening, Mike, turn it over to you, the AB introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the good big picture review. I have just a couple of other sort of big picture points I'd like to make and then turn to some of the specifics of the agreement. Even though everybody does like to listen to lawyers talk, we'll try to keep brief. I do think it's important to keep in mind something that's pretty unusual in my experience in Washington. We represent dozens and dozens of cities. One of the things that's pretty unusual about North Bend is city and its water utility serves a portion of the city limits, and then also another portion out in unincorporated county. The Salal Water Association serves a separate portion of city limits, also a separate unincorporated county. So when Salal ran into some water availability issues, not only affected its customers in unincorporated county, it made it unlikely and impossible for city residents and city property owners to get water. Those city properties were in Salal service area. So with that background, we back up to 2007 when the city got its Centennial Well water. City had been in a water moratorium for several years. It then was in pretty much the same situation that Salal is, running out of water available. A significant positive feature of the Centennial Well permit is the amount of water that it allows the city to draw. In round numbers, the city can take about 3,100 acre feet per year and maximum of 2,650 gallons per minute. That's what we're authorized. The actual use is much, much lower. Never exceeded 500 acres a year, a sixth of the maximum. Our projected maximum gallons per minute this year is about 1,100, less than 40% of them. It is that excess Centennial well capacity help put this deal together in fairly short order. Once we really came to realize how those numbers work. You'll hear that from Gray and Osborne. My dad was an engineer. He wanted me to be an engineer. Barely worked calculator, but when the Gray and Osborne fellows here, Mike and Russ, had a joint meeting with the Salal and city negotiating teams, the light bulb came on for all of them. You're going to learn a lot of that. So that background, and obviously Mark and I are happy to take any questions. Let me just touch on a couple of the key points in the agreement. So you've got it in your packet, sections 1 and 2 are some recitals that give some background, some key definitions that go throughout the agreement. Section 3 is the creation of this intertie management committee. It'll do, I think, 2 important things. One, continue to build on and increase the cooperation and coordination between Mark, his technical folks, and Salal and their technical folks. So the committee will also come up with a water usage plan, better definition to the sale and exchanges of water. Section 4 is the details on the sale of mitigation water by Salal to the city. Mitigation water is what we need under that Centennial well permit in very rare circumstances, but it does when withdrawals through the Centennial well permit bring river level of the Snoqualmie down to an unacceptable level. And we have this mitigation requirement, water back into the river. Obviously, that's come from a different source, from the Snoqualmie River itself. Permit authorizes 2 mitigation water sources. One is the current Hobo Spring source that we have had in place since 2008, Seattle Public Utilities, and very reliable, haven't had issues. But our Centennial well permit also authorizes a second mitigation source, and that's with Salal and its Rattlesnake Snake Lake well field. That's what this agreement hopefully will put together. On section 4, Salal is obligated to sell the city up to 100 acre feet per year of mitigation water. There are no conceivable circumstances where the city would ever take less than 100 acres of Salal because it's cheaper than the Hobo Springs Seattle Public Utilities source. There's section 4 also has some details about how the pumping works, capacities work. There has a provision for dealing with a generalized emergency or water shortage in Salal's water service area, and then a separate provision for localized emergency required maintenance of government inspection, that built-in provisions for that. Section 5, reverse, it's sale of the city's municipal water to Salal. In that case, will sell much as Salal reasonably determines, but with an important caveat that it not in any manner that would exceed our maximum permissible withdrawals from under the Centennial well. Again, given those numbers, the maximum we can take versus what actually used, no concern in any of our lifetimes it will amount. Both of those sections also have some details about what construction of necessary interties, the actual facilities in the ground and valves, change that water. Our folks will those details. You don't want the lawyers involved on that. Section 6 deals with the rates. City will surely be taking 100 acre feet per year from Salal. The first 100 acre feet that we then provide to Salal will just be an exchange. Won't be any money swap. The cities, according to Gray and Osborne's calculations, while the city costs the city a little bit more to produce our treated water, and then Salal to produce untreated water at Rattlesnake Lake. Order of magnitude is about $800 a year. We just set that aside as a, to the extent Salal buys more than 108 feet from the city, and it will, Salal will pay the city's actual cost on a ratable basis for all of the actual, so we viewed and put into a spreadsheet, Richard or Mark. Section 7, as Rob mentioned, conservation of the water resources is an important thing. City Council has adopted the water conservation ordinance. Section 7 obligates Salal to support that, and also Salal agrees that WCO applies every square inch of city dirt, including the area served Salal. So Salal's water service area in the city. Likewise, Section 7 obligates Salal's board within 180 days to adopt a resolution that's substantially similar. Section 8 is just boilerplate, a bunch of lawyer stuff. One thing that I did want to call your attention is the term of this agreement is 40 years.
You're looking at me. I'm assuming you've completed your summary.
I am done.
Council, I'll remind you, we do have a presentation by GNO coming up. Are there any clarifying questions from Mike before we move to that? Gentlemen, you're on. Clerk is sure to require you to tell us who you are.
I'm Russ Porter. I've been with Grant Osborne a long time, and I've been working for the city of North Bend for at least 20 years, maybe a little bit longer.
My name's Mike Johnson. I'm a principal engineer at Grant Osborne. I've been, since 97, and been only working with Slough here the last few years, but I'm intimately familiar with their system over the last.
Okay. Previous speakers have talked a little bit about the mitigation requirements, and I'll kind of summarize them, at least in the context we view them as engineers. The Centennial Well requires mitigation when in-stream flows are not met. In-stream flows are set by wildlife. If they're not met and you're using the Centennial Well, mitigation requirement is required. Now, that amount of mitigation is determined by a groundwater model. Takes a look at the influence of the well on the river itself. It was developed by some hydrogeologists. It takes a look at over time, like if one day doesn't have a big effect, several days in a row that effect compounds until after a few weeks, essentially everything you pull out of the well has an influence on the groundwater model aspect. And so one of the considerations with mitigation is you do get credit for some of the water that it uses. 60% of the water that comes out of the Centennial Well is figured to go through the system into the wastewater treatment plant and then go back into the river. You get a credit. So you're using the well, you have to mitigate. But first take a look at that 60% to see if anything above that. If you do have to mitigate above that, then you have to bring in additional water. And right now that water. Now the in-stream flows are seasonal. Sometimes they're not met in the middle of the winter. Sometimes they're not met dry season, which is usually not met at the end of the summer. So there's sort of a mitigation season. Usually for the city of North, that mitigation season starts in July, August, and ends in October.
So, as Mr. Kenyon indicated, North Bend has excess annual water right, and Slough is short on annual water right, but Slough has excess instantaneous water capacity, which allows us to potentially provide that water to North Bend as mitigation. Currently, Slough has excess capacity because they've got current well production capacity of about 2,700 gallons a minute. Their current instantaneous water right is 1,691 gallons a minute for all of their sources.
with those capacities, and essentially instantaneous water right capacity being the limiter. If you look at the usage that Slough has had recently, and we're projecting for next year, in July, August, Slough would have about 650 gallons a minute of excess instantaneous capacity that could be used for mitigation. In September, October timeframe, that increases to about 900 gallons a minute. And then the rest of the year have over 1,000 gallons a minute provide as potential mitigation water used by the city. And this graph essentially tells that story in a little more detail. So if you look at the lower part of the, or sorry, on the left side, we've got production rate in gallons per minute. Along the bottom, we have the months of the year, and this is for 2022. And the lower green dots on the graph show essentially daily maximum daily demand by the Slough water system. And you can see in January through July, probably average 200 to 400 gallons a minute on average each. And then as you get to summer, peaks out closer to 1,000 gallons a minute. You look at the top of the graph, I have a red line there that shows the Slough instantaneous water right of 1,691 gallons a minute. So difference between that red line and any of those green dots or the blue trend line there is the amount of available water that would be possible for mitigation that could be used by the city of North Bend. The other thing we plotted on this graph was mitigation need for North Bend, and light blue dots at the top are essentially mitigation need starting at 0 at the Slough water right at 1691 and then moving downward. So you can see in the September, October timeframe, mitigation need from North Bend in 2022 range to 400 to 500 gallons a minute. And so if you subtract that off of the 1,691 gallons a minute, you get down to roughly 12 to 1,400 gallons a minute of water remaining available for the Slough Water Association if Slough had mitigated every drop of water that North Bend needed in 2022. So this graph essentially shows the opportunity where Slough has excess instantaneous water available that could potentially be used to meet city's mitigation need. If we expand out a little bit and we look over the last 3 years, you can see each year, this is plotting mostly the water usage from, say, May through November each year. But you can see there's this temporal shift where Slough's peak demands tend to be in July, August, and the peak mitigation need tends to be in more of the September, October timeframe. And each year, you can see there's plenty of opportunity available for Slough to potentially provide mitigation water to the city of North Bend. And the last 3 years, there's not a day where those overlap. There was always excess water, even after Slough could have provided mitigation water to the city. Now, one of the issues that Slough has is that they are nearing their annual water right, and they can't supply mitigation water at this moment in time without obtaining an equivalent amount of water back from North Bend. Now, Slough could receive that water back at a different time from North Bend when Slough's providing for mitigation. In some ways, that actually makes a lot more sense, and we'll talk about that as we go further. But for example, if that 100 acre feet of water that Slough is providing for mitigation were replaced between January 1st and June 30th, you'd have to do that with about 125 gallons a minute running continuously that 6-month period. If instead you didn't do any mitigation or any return in those first 6 months, and instead you did it the last 2 months of the year, Slough would need to receive 375 gallons a minute continuously to make up that 100 acre feet. So there's a million different scenarios which that mitigation water could be replaced, but these give you a couple of bounds on how that might look. So in order for Slough to provide mitigation to water to North Bend, there would have to be some improvements made, and it could happen in a couple of different phases. Now, Salau has 3 rattlesnake wells, well 1, well 2, and well 4. Wells 1 and 2 have capacities of approximately 700 gallons a minute each. Well 4 has a capacity of about 1,200 gallons a minute. The well 2 is the closest well to the existing Boxley Creek mitigation line. And there is a pipeline that goes close to it. Well 2 has its own chlorinator. And so well 2 could easily be connected up the pipeline from the end of the CT pipeline to the Boxley Creek mitigation line. And then when mitigation water was needed, Salau could turn off the chlorinator and provide chlorinated water as mitigation. Now, in order to do that at a range of different flow rates, the existing constant speed motor starter would need to be replaced with a variable speed drive, which would allow for that stability. There would also need to be some minor control modifications needed to implement that control scheme. If North Bend needs more than 700 gallons a minute at some point and up to the 1,000 gallons a minute, which is described in the draft agreement, Salau would need to connect up their well 1 pipeline around the well 4 pipeline to the well 2 pipeline. It's some complicated piping up there. It's not very far. It's about 50 feet. It's some connections, some valves to make that happen. Again, some minor control modifications. In that case, both well 1 and well 2 could potentially be used mitigation water, while well 4 provided the bulk water to Salau. This is a diagram showing how that all works. The details are probably not that important, but I'll just tell you that the 700 gallons a minute phase 1 require modification to the well 2 pump, and then also about 400 feet of pipeline between the existing well 2 connection and the Boxley Creek mitigation line. And then that second phase would require an additional about 50 feet of pipe connect well 1 to the well 2, bypassing the well 4.
So if we could use well 2, what would that look like in terms of the needs of North Bend for mitigation? To put this graph together to kind of illustrate that over the past few years, on the x-axis, we've got time. Starting in first kind of spot there is 2009 going through 2023, or I guess 2022. That's the x-axis. The y-axis is the mitigation flow in GPM. Blue dots are the actual mitigation data that the city has had to use for the last few years. And we've superimposed on that the red line, which is the capacity of well 2. So you can see that each one of those blue dots represents a day. That was the requirement for mitigation for that day. And the way it works is in the morning, North Bend staff take a look at the water use, they take a look at the in-stream flows, they take a look at that hydrogeological model, and they come up with a number. Like, okay, we did this yesterday, we did that the day before. The model says that we need to mitigate 250 GPM. They punch 250 GPM into the control system and send a signal up to the valve. It opens up and 250 GPM flow for the next hour. Each one of those dots in that graph represents 1 day's worth of flow. And you can see there's a peak. Each one of those peaks is the middle of the year. So, the first one is 2009 and the last one is 3. And you can see those flows vary mostly between 0 and 500 GPM, but there's a few that have gone up as high as 11. But if you look at the capacity of the well 2, Salau's well 2, right there at 700, there would have only been about 20 to 25 days in the last, in that data period over 10 years where well 2 would not have been able to provide all of the mitigation. And so on those days, what you would imagine is, well, we use well 2, but we also use some of the Lobo Springs water from SPU. Under that scenario, it looks like well 2 could have provided almost all of it.
This goes more to the how-to of getting water from North Bend to Salau. And this diagram is oriented a little bit oddly, try and illustrate how the water flows down. Down at the bottom is the Centennial well, and we're looking essentially to the southeast. So up to the southwest, you can see where the where Salau's existing rattlesnake wells are located. Well 1, 2, and 4 up on on the hill there, and their reservoirs are up there too. So most of the time, water is flowing down through several pressure reducing valves through different pressure zones till it gets to the lowest pressure zone, which is at the valley floor, and where essentially we are at this point. There are 2 pump stations that pump water from that lowest pressure zone up to the northeast into areas that have their Edgewood and Middle Fork and Terrell reservoirs. So if Salau is to receive water from North Bend, their lowest pressure zone, their 710 pressure zone, is actually higher than the North Bend pressure zone. So a booster pump station would be required to pump water up from North Bend to Salau. And then water from that booster station could go into that lowest pressure zone, but it could also get pumped up to the other pressure zones to the northeast. At this point in time, it would not be able to get pumped up to the zones towards the south because there's no pump stations there. So we have done some preliminary analysis for the city of Slough, the Slough Water Association, to better understand how water could flow into their lowest pressure zone. And this is, again, a technical detail, but we've been working with their hydraulic model because they do not have storage in that lowest zone. So we have to essentially only put into that zone what the customers can take or what the booster pump stations can pump out of that. So hydraulic modeling we've done has shown that that lowest pressure zone currently could take a fair bit of water, even at the lowest demand time of the season. And over time, that lowest pressure zone could take quite a bit more water as demand in that zone increases. So what we would need in order to transmit water from North Bend to Salau is to construct an intertie and a booster station. And we've identified a couple of potential locations, one on 436 between Cedar Falls and North Bend Way, and then another at the east end of the Dahlgren property. And that cost is probably the biggest cost here, and it's $1.2 million to $1.5 million roughly to do that booster station and intertie. And here's a graph showing potential locations, and that exhibit has also been included with the draft intertie agreement.
To make it work, there has to be some coordination between North Bend and Salau. Obviously, in times when mitigation water is not needed, Salau would be using their well for production, and they chlorinate at the well. So at some point when it looks like mitigation might be pending, city staff would have to talk to North Bend and say, hey, we need to use the well for mitigation. Well would be, chlorinator at the well would be turned off. The valving would be changed so the water would be directed to the mitigation line and not to the Salau system. And then we would hope that it would be dedicated for the mitigation period. So that's kind of a seasonal change that would have to happen. But on a daily basis, North Bend personnel, like I've indicated in the morning, figures out what their mitigation needs are for the day, and they kind of punch it in at 8 o'clock, and it's a fairly strict regimen that they go through. And so they would need to be able to communicate those needs with Salau personnel so that they could go up and control the well to meet the mitigation flow. So that coordination would have to happen. And there is one other consideration in that Salau personnel are on a 5-day work schedule and just are on call on weekends. So there may need to be some kind of consideration there, but that's something that the two organizations can work out. Now, the system would work best if Salau is not receiving from water at the same time mitigation is required. Kind of makes sense. I mean, you're mitigating is kind of an extreme circumstance because the stream flows are low and it's a perturbation on the system, and there's a large portion of the year when mitigation isn't required and there's no restriction on using the water. Kind of understand these impacts. We had city staff put together some scenarios where 750,000 gallons were taken from Centennial Well for its customers and Mount Si isn't available. Mitigation was required. We kind of wanted to look at some scenarios to see what the effect of having to provide additional water on top of that give back to Salal for mitigation. So we've got scenario one, where we have 100% of the mitigation is being returned or is being supplied by Salal. 100% of that water is being mitigated on the same day by the city. So in other words, you're pulling water out of the well, your use, causing mitigation, but you're also pulling mitigation water out of the well to provide to Salal. You've got a second scenario where you're only returning about 50% of the mitigation requirement. And that's either 50% of the mitigation water supplied by Salal, you're providing all of that water back to Salal, and the other 50% is provided by Hobo Springs. Or 100% is provided by Salal, and you're just providing. Or the scenario three is no mitigation water is provided back to Salal on the same day that you're using. So either you're using all of Hobo Springs water or you're using all Salal water and you're just not providing it back on that. And so if we graph these, and I'll explain what's on this graph. On the lower axis, the x-axis is mitigation day. And each one of those bars is a 2-day bar. See the numbers starting with day 1. And on the y-axis is the daily Centennial well production. This is in millions of gallons. And we're going to start, and the purple line that's at about 3.8 million gallons, that's a horizontal line. That's the capacity of Centennial well water rights. That can't exceed that amount on a given day. We're going to start with the green line, the one that's down near the bottom. That's scenario 3. That's the scenario where you're using the well. You're either getting mitigation water from Salal or you're getting it from Hobo Springs, but you're not providing any water back to Salal during that mitigation period on that given day. And you can see that just pulling the water from the well, 750,000 gallons each day for the entire period. If we look at what it would take to provide 50% of that mitigation water back to Salal, that's the red line, scenario 2. You can see that in addition to water that you're using, you've got to add that water that you're sending back to them. But over a period of a few days, it kind of reaches a steady state and everything's. However, in this model, if we go to the full 100%, blows up. That's the blue line that kind of rises there at an angle. And you can see that after about day 7, suddenly the compounding of using water, providing all of the mitigation water, makes it such that about day 7, you reach the capacity. So the take-home message from this graph is you can't provide all of the mitigation water to Salal on the same day you're using water. Centennial. So optimal operation of mitigation would be that Salal would receive water from North Bend earlier in the year when North Bend needs mitigation, especially on days when you don't have to mitigate. I mean, that's in everybody's best interest to kind of maximize the use of the well when you don't have to mitigate. And then you would go through the mitigation period. And let's say you didn't quite have a good balance in between what Salal had taken, in the early part of the year and what North Bend had taken for mitigation. You'd have a couple of months at the end of the year to make that up. Salal had, if North Bend had taken a few more acre feet over the mitigation period, provide them some acre feet November, December, make up. There's a way to. With that, question.
Council, again, before we'll turn to public comment, we'll look for any clarifying questions. If you don't have any for these guys, you're really on top of it. Heather.
I don't know it's a question for you or for Mark, but who's going to keep track of all this water switching and chlorine turning off? And that's a lot.
Yeah, we have our public works staff. I don't specifically do that every day, but a water group for 5 employees, and our city engineer, Don DeBerg, who you're familiar with, he checks in each day with our water folks. And likewise, Salal has operators that are certified by Washington State.
Thank you. Will this be like a 24/7 potential? Will be available if there's a need? understand me? Like,
Yeah, no, we just normally run the mitigation at 8 in the morning is when we'll turn it on. So we're not here all night checking things.
just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure.
But we'll be checking things on the weekend. We do mitigate on Saturdays or Sundays. We have valves on for Sundays.
Smart.
Other.
This is a weird question. Are you guys gonna each other ease your water systems, Salal and the North End?
So, we're talking about that. Our initial conversations with Salau on this, is that they're open to that. So we will have access through SCADA, control their system when we need to mitigate. We'll notify them and we will have that authority.
Mark, you might want to explain what SCADA is versus a key.
So it's how we run software, hardware, telemetry, so we can run everything from a computer, open, close valves without having to manually do it. SCADA is SCADA, it's scientific for
Advisory control and
data acquisition. Yeah. It's not intuitive acronym at all.
That's what we pay Russ for, is to know that definition.
And does Salal have similar technology that we have?
Mike, would you like to answer that question?
It's not the same, but it's similar. They have a SCADA system that does similar things to what the North End does. It's not exactly the same.
Schlonbeck.
Similar, but not the same. Are they going to talk to each other?
I don't think that they would necessarily talk to each other. I think it would be, and these are details that still need to be worked out. And I think this operating committee is really a good way to do that. But my expectation is that it would likely be a login that North Bend could log into a specific screen on the Salal SCADA system to be able to manage a couple of different variables on the Salal system.
Sounded like that there was going to be some question about work schedules coordinating, and if we're going to be mitigating over the weekend, we would actually need to have that access to make the system functional.
Yeah, and that again is a detail to be worked out. We had a real good discussion a couple of weeks ago with some of the operating staff about brainstorming how that could happen, and it could be through one of these SCADA solutions. It could also be simply whoever's on call at North Bend calls whoever's on call at Salal, and they log in and they make the change. So there are a number of different potential solutions. We just haven't worked with that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll kind of even kick it a little bit higher. It was one of the breakthroughs, really, I think, in discussions as we had this presentation, as they explained to us how this would work, that both teams got very comfortable with the idea that it is this intertie committee, the professionals, who need to be able to work together and figure out all of those kind of details, and that our job was to set up a framework under which they could do that. And that's key to this agreement. I've got Mr. Rosen, then Mr. Owen.
Time frame. When do you see this build out being complete and the system up and running?
So we would expect that the booster pump station is probably the largest or the longest lead time, and we'd expect that that's by middle of 2025 is our hope. The other modifications that would be necessary up at Salal Wellfield would happen probably more quickly, just because there's less involved, and probably within a year.
Thanks.
Mr. Owen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Are there future milestones or markers where we'll be going back and looking at the existing data? Because a lot of this is modeled and trended, really check in that the modeling and the trending data are still on par, so that there's no anomaly or something that will throw us off. Does that make sense?
It does. And I don't know that the agreement has a specific set of milestones for that, but I do think that's important. I think it's part of this intertie operating committee, because each year the city and the Salau members of that operating committee are supposed to get together and forecast their needs. So maybe North Bend looks like, hey, we think we're going to need about 75 acre feet this year. Okay, so Salau will plan on taking 75 acre feet at some point early in the year, and then be able to have that banked, if you will, so that North Bend has that mitigation capability in the middle of the year. And if there's a change in that, okay, then the Intertie Committee will get together and say, okay, we need another 10. We'll make sure we get that mitigated at the, or offset at the end of the year. But I do think, you know, at annual check-in of what does North Bend think they need this year, and how does Salau plan on taking that, is a good time frame to reassess how is this working and where is this going. You know, before this meeting, we were actually at the Salau board meeting presenting this same information, and there were actually a lot of really good questions about some of the longer term projections. You know, we have some idea of what projections may look like, but with climate change, with different growth rates that happen due to a lot of different factors that we don't have any control of, things change. And the ability to adapt and to reassess and understand how those changes are impacting how this water management is actually working is important.
Thank you.
God help.
This one is actually for Mark, and it's more with our water system plan. So talking what 2025 is this being in place? Is this going to affect us getting prepared? Last what we had a 5-year window. Is it going to affect us getting through that?
We're on great timing for that. So when this is implemented, and expect that this water supply agreement moves forward, that Grant Osborne will be designing these systems. These will be constructed in 2024, perhaps as long as 2025 in that time. We'll start with our water system plan update in late 2024. It is due early 2026. So it's running concurrent with, so timing is good.
Good question. Any other questions? So Council, I'll just draw your attention. You have to do it in your mind since the graphics are down. Me, the most impactful one there, picture of the graph that they put up, where on the lower half it was showing the flow going through, and on the upper part of it, it was showing that kind of in reverse coming down. Focus there was the gap. That gap is what convinced both negotiating teams that this works day in, day out. Good with that. Thank you, gentlemen. Don't go far. Okay, and with that, we'll move to public comment. If there's anyone here at City Hall who wishes to speak to this agenda item, please move towards the podium. We might want to take the laptop off the podium. Seeing again, no mad rush towards the podium. Give you a moment to step back to the mic. Do we have anyone online?
No one online.
Wow, okay. Mr. Loudenback, I believe.
Okay, Your Honor. Motion to approve AB 23-050, a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign an agreement for the wholesale water supply of water with Salau Water Association as a first reading.
You, a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Rosen. Mr. Loudenback. I'm sure you have a few comments. I hope you have a few comments.
Well, I've been privileged to serve the citizens of North Bend for nearly 20 years on this council. And I can't think of a single more important piece of legislation to come forward than this particular agreement. And I'm hoping that it will move through, be approved, and be enacted. I think it is essential to the future of the community, and would recommend to do that.
You, Mr. Rosen.
Yeah, second all of what Ross just said. It's been a long road, and I'm glad to see You're there. I'll send my compliments and congratulations once done. For some folks around here I'm looking at have worked very hard. We'll save that. And just general comments. I know reading goes on in the community and listening and talking to folks that I feel over the last several years, unfortunately, the water has become a tool or something that those are using to address growth. And I think that is slightly misguided, coming from someone who's certainly opposed to growth. There's better tools, planning, zoning, comp plan amendments. This is where you focus. Water is crucial to any city. It's not just residential growth, there's commercial growth. Most important, it's your future. You should have the ability to allow your future council and your future residents to have options. Maybe they want to grow, maybe they don't. We don't know what they want to do, but to take away water removes those choices. I think it's very important that cities have those choices in the future so that they can determine their own future. What we see as pressing today may be completely different in 20 years. So I am glad to see this moving forward. This is something that'll secure our future, Salal's future. They'll stay independent, and I think that is most important to Salal members. And I thank you for all the efforts, guys. And as I said, we'll do that a little more once we get, but well done so far.
Thank you. Ms. Coleman.
I have been on the council for 3 years, and water is the #1 thing that we have talked about when I was running to be elected, and since I've been on. And I know more about water now than I ever thought I would in my life. I know about senior water rights, junior water rights, mitigation, you name it. And I think it's great for both of our organizations to help each other, and I'm hoping it's a great partnership.
Thank you. Mr. Godhouse.
I haven't been on council as long as Ross, so I will put that right. But as long as I've been on council, one of the first things we talked about coming out of mitigation water was that we would have an agreement with Salal. So I want to bring everybody back that Salal was at the table when we got our water rights. We were there, we were a partner trying to move this thing forward. It wasn't contentious to begin with. And again, there's other factors that have made this contentious over the years. A lot of people talking about information that are non-facts and really muddied this up. And I applaud Salal's board for actually coming to the table and working with us on something I think has been in the works for 18 years now. It's something this community deserves. And I know there's going to be a lot of fluff and bluster, a lot of people saying a lot of different things. Ask the citizens, look at the facts, not the bluster. We have spent time looking at this and making sure that this is environmentally proper. We have a water conservation ordinance, one of the items that was good for us. And I would also ask or tell you, I don't think we've had anybody that has exceeded there, got penalized during that period of time. I know people, want to say, well, I can't water my property. It's going to affect wildfire. It's not true. If you're worried about wildfire on your property, please reach out to Eastside Fire and Rescue. We'll come out there and assess your property. And the last fires we've had out here, a lot of green acreage did burn. So there's other options that you have to do in the wildfire interface to protect your home. And I suggest you take a look at that because I know there's been a lot of misinformation saying, oh, I need this water to water my lawn, or if my lawn's not watered, that's going to cause wildfire. Not true. Please seek out the professionals. Please look at the fact and don't listen to the bluster. And I applaud the people that have gotten us to this.
Thank you. Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My colleagues have expressed a lot of the information that I was going to put forward tonight. I just want to add that this is the short period of time that I've been on board, similar to my friend Heather over there. There's been a full length of knowledge base, education, a profound amount of education on water. I couldn't be happier to be more informed, and my associates as well. these are all good things to go forward in our community and be able to speak fully into this very important action, hopefully coming our way. I applaud, just like my cohort right here, Ellen, everybody who's put such a strong effort forth, excellent work, and Salal board, thank you for your time and efforts. I think we're in the end going to be doing great things together, and that's a beautiful part of being part of this valley. Thank you.
Mr. Elwood.
And Heather, we learned tonight that SCADA is scientific computer blah, blah, blah. Every day is a learning moment. Yeah, I echo all my colleagues' sentiments. I think for me, another big win here is that we're bringing the community together. There's so many dividing factors out there all over the place, and this could be one less. I applaud Salal and the board for really taking this seriously and working with us to get it to this far and to get it across the finish line, but also acknowledging that there are citizens that, you know, we're kind of outside of our city line in a sense, but now we're coming together. So hopefully this will be a chapter that we can close the door on. It'll be a great partnership, and everybody in our community will feel a little bit more whole. And Salal and where you live on that borderline will be less of a contentious issue at dinner parties, like I've experienced, and so forth. So I'm just liking the coming togetherness of our community with this big action. So major hats off and kudos to Mark and team and Dave and Rob and Mike, everybody along the way who has gotten us to this point, the patience, the due diligence, and sticking with it to get it done. So well done, you all. Thank you very much. You serve your community very well.
Very much. I'm going to have a few more comments before we vote on the motion, but I think this, being that this is as being expressed fairly momentous, I want to make sure that some of the staff involved has, if they have any more input. And Mark, I'll look to you first. Works is your world.
Yeah, I've been working on this for 9 years, long time, a lot of brain power used on this. And this is a good solution. Partnership, an important community group. This is a real good solution, a 40-year contract. Win for the city, it's a win for Salal. I think we both reduced our costs as well as a result of this to rates lower. Another outcome.
Dave, anything you want to add?
I'm really surprised at this council. Could you throw any more at them in 2 months? I mean, we had a garbage a contract. I mean, all of these big things coming at you. This is very unusual. Unusual for a council in a city of this size to get whacked with all of these big decisions in a short period of time. So kudos to you.
Kenyon, you had a pretty good piece. Do you have any final comments?
As many of the council members mentioned, there's some discussion, if you will, going on out in the community and on blogs, but Rob's goal all along, 3 years I've been involved, has been, regardless of who wins or lose, make sure that everybody has all the water they need when they want it. This agreement does that for Salal, and it does it for the city. This is one of those rare wins.
And that's a nice segue, Mike, because that's exactly what I was going to say. When I ran for office, I made it clear that one of my goals is finding a solution that ensured that all had water availability in both systems. How we got there, it's not as important as how we arrived. And so this, I think, does represent the single best way of getting there. There are other paths. We didn't like those paths. Certainly Salal didn't want to see some of those paths taken. And this is, as it has been from, as was mentioned from day one, when Salal was right there with us on getting the water right that's now called Centennial. So it has been a long time. I'll say also in looking back, you know, I've led some pretty large teams for some pretty big corporations, dealt with some pretty complex issues. There's nothing quite like trying to negotiate between very powerful presidents of companies within a multi-conglomerate, get them to come to agreement. I have a master's degree, and I'll tell you, I've never run into anything as complicated as water rights, rules, figuring out what comes before what, figuring out how in the heck does the water flow and going to work. It's the most complicated issue. It's been one of the most complicated and divisive things that I've dealt with. It's been quite a learning process, and I would say that I think I've learned and gotten to a better place throughout this time, and that process did lead me to where we are today, as far as feeling very good about this agreement and what it can do for meeting of the needs of the community. So feeling very good about that. In the go forward, as the motion reads, this is a first reading. This is not the last time this will come before council. And as a reminder to all, the expectation is that it will return to council for a final vote once Salal has fully approved the agreement. As was mentioned tonight by GNO in their presentation, they were there earlier this evening. I believe that meeting is still going on, but the Salal board's intention was similar to us, to at minimum introduce this topic onto their board, take a preliminary vote. They did commit with their membership that they were going to hold 2 membership meetings at a 30-day gap between them to hear feedback before they would sign the contract. The membership does not have a vote. It is a vote of the board. There is that. And so the expectation here is that once Salal completes their process, which we are very confident they're going to get through, that it will be back in front of you, with the hope that that would be by early June, as that is our target. So I wanted that to be clear. And as Mr. Rosen, I think, was referencing, we'll hold the cheers until they're really due, because we're not across the finish line by any stretch of the imagination. This is still a lot of work to come, but just getting to this point was huge. With that, if there's nothing else, motion before you is to approve AB 23-050, resolution authorizing the mayor to sign an agreement for the wholesale supply of water with Salal Water Association as a first reading. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries and it is unanimous. Thank you very much, council. I appreciate that. Huge day. And with that, that was the last main agenda item. We'll move on to mayor, council, and administrator concerns and initiatives. Mr. Godhealth.
Just want to thank everybody for where we got to, and hopefully in June we'll get there. Again, one of my reminders, as we get more and more daylight, a lot of people are out walking around. Please be careful. Watch as you're driving around, as our grandchildren and children out there playing. So just make sure that.
Great, be careful of my granddaughter.
Absolutely. And I again remind you, I want to give kudos to our team based on some of the work they did with Eastside and what we've got coming up. Really proud to hear all the stuff going on and what they've done. So I want to put that out there. Seriously, if you're in the wildland interface, please do reach out to our professionals. There's a program that they're beginning to reach out that will allow them to come out, take a look at your house. On top of it, look for grants and other money to help you get your house prepared and safe if you were to be in a wildfire. Encourage citizens to avail themselves to it.
Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the great pleasure to enjoy the live production of Picasso at Lapin Agile. By Valley Center Stage last Sunday afternoon. It is written by Steve Martin, who you may all be familiar with, of course, and it's terrifically cast with a pretty impressive set, I might add, and it is a quick-witted and full of engaging characters. This show will continue for the next couple of weekends. The last day is the 30th, I believe. Is that correct, Brendan? Oh, perfect. And I might add that it is also directed by Winter and Brendan Elwood. Kudos to you both and your fine team of creative geniuses putting on really brilliant play. I hope everybody has a moment in time to take a break from arduous days or whatnot and just laugh. That's what I loved about it mostly. On Saturday morning, I had the great pleasure to go visit Habitat for Humanity's new Tylertown build completion ceremony. I was joined by Mayor Robb, of course, who spoke eloquently, and Heather Colin, who was there as well. So we had a great, memorable day, attended well by many people. And what got me and still moves me most is the incredible stories of these families who spoke to the not often easy days they had in putting their sweat equity to work, but also the backstories of their lives in general. I think everybody was teared up pretty well, but it's an expression of how the need for affordable housing is possible and how lucky we are to have had the Kernick family donate the property right here in downtown North Bend. Habitat for Humanity, I hope I have my number correct, but it has only about 60 builds across the nation currently. So we should be very proud and grateful to see this in action and welcome our neighbors to town and get to know them as well. Thank you.
I was hoping you weren't going to name the director. I was going to ask if he was any good. Mr. Elwood.
Thank you. And thank you for the Habitat for Humanity recap. That was great. Thank you to staff. Again, I'm going to echo all the work on the water and a lot of these big ticket items. As Mr. Miller has pointed out, this has been a heavy year, which is great. Hopefully we'll get a lot done and put in motion in the next year. Be coasting. And then I was going to put a plug in for our show, but you just did a brilliant job. So just listen to everything Mary said, and please come check out our production. It's at the Slough Grange. We run 2 weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, next weekend, or this coming weekend, and then close the following weekend thereafter. And then there will be another production by some other folks that will become after that. It's a play called Clean House. It's a family comedy with some crying and some laughing, I guess. So that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Laudenbach.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah. Interesting and momentous night tonight. Hopefully the beginning of an end to a very long and arduous process, but one that a journey that had to be taken and is going to really profoundly change the future of the community for all members. And as long as we're giving out plugs, those of you who are jazz aficionados, this 22nd Jazz Walk, downtown North Bend, get out and support your local businesses. Here's some excellent jazz, and you'll probably run into a lot of your friends and neighbors and maybe a few council members.
No doubt. Mr. Rosen.
Ditto to Ross. Yeah, about the water. It's been a long journey. So I'm glad to see that we're nearing the end. There when we sign the last document. Compliments, Ms. Miller. That is rather brave to give a review of a play sitting inches away from the director. I'm not so sure I'd be that bold.
He's got long arms too.
Aw. Thank you all for your patience tonight, and appreciate it. Have a great night.
I would like to echo Mary on the Habitat for Humanity dedication. Bravo to the family that donated one house and turned it into 7 homes right in the heart of North Bend by North Bend Elementary. This habitat will not only help these 7 families, but moving in future, it will help multiple other families And it helps the ones in there build equity, something they wouldn't have had before. And it's just the most amazing gift. I could cry right now thinking about it. And also I-90 going west this week. Take your time getting there because they're doing construction through Friday. It's patient with your fellow I-90 drivers.
That's fantastic. I'll lead off. Well, Mr. Miller, let me make sure I've turned to you. Sorry.
I want to give the right congratulations. The triumvirate did it. Mayor Rob, Mike, Mark. Those are the guys that, you know, they did it. I watched and I suppose I probably prayed for them a little bit. And there was a lot of frustration involved, but these guys really did a great job. This is an excellent accomplishment by all of you guys.
I'm gonna kind of lead off and again, I think Mary and Heather said a lot and good things regarding the habitat. It was a fantastic event. I estimated at least 60 folks turned out, possibly more, including Congresswoman Schreier came and spoke. We had several state legislators there as well, representative from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and in the speeches by the 7 new homeowners with varied stories. And yes, crying was definitely appropriate for some of what we heard and what we're able to do. And but I couldn't let that go without saying that is what it takes. And so one of the things that I've learned in the last 3 years is if you hear me use the word affordable, I am talking about subsidized housing. This project is emblematic of what it takes, public, private, and nonprofits. Gift of this family with the land, the energy and the funds that the waivers that this council did towards the project to help it get done. Habitat for Humanity is a nonprofit agency for what they did. The support of the federal government through USDA loan grants as well. All of those things is what it takes to get this kind of project done. It's a fantastic project. It looks wonderful. It is a perfect addition to that neighborhood, and taking care of those families is great. And yes, I would like to see us be able to do more similar projects of that kind of a quality build, but it does take all of that and more. In more typical notes, maybe not so typical. First one, want to mention apparently tomorrow we're having a meetup with the mayor. Community members are invited to attend 4:30 to 5:30 at Volition Brewery in downtown to discuss city-related topics important to you. This is something new, moving into the little more of the afternoon time block instead of morning. I certainly hope it's not raining. It'd be a nice afternoon to sit out. We're going to do that. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that you didn't notice I got your card earlier today. In honor of Earth Day, the city invites the community members to join us for our 3rd year of North Bend Beautification Days on April 21st and 22nd. More information about the event is available by visiting the community calendar on the city website. As I think I mentioned prior, I know of at least one HOA that is doing a companion event. Yard waste recycling program will be held this Saturday, April 22nd from 8 a.m. to noon at Public Works. Those attending are asked to use the Public Works entrance off of North Bend Way. Snoqualmie and North Bend Police Department will be hosting a prescription drug take-back day on Saturday, April 22nd. That's also this Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon. That is at the Snoqualmie Fire Station. We did want to share that with our community for those who want to take part in that. Community members are invited to bring expired, unused, and unwanted prescription pills or patches for disposal. Finally, the city, in conjunction with the Snoqualmie Tribe, will be holding a special recycling event on Saturday, April 29th, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Snoqualmie Middle School. The event is open to all King County residents wishing to dispose of scrap metal, appliances, electronics, fluorescent bulbs, tires, and batteries. I'll just say, as I read that last one, in conjunction with the Snoqualmie tribe, a great partnership there. And we've heard partnership several times tonight. I want to say it's one of the things that I'm most proud of is what we've been able to accomplish is to solidify and grow several partnerships. Mr. Godhelf was talking about police and fire and emergency management. We've talked about what Salal Association and this agreement means in partnership. We're looking for ways to partner ever more with the tribe. Our agreements with the Sivey Metropolitan Park District, all of these are huge partnerships. We're working more and more with Snoqualmie, reaching out and broadening that into the valley and beyond. All of these things end up benefiting the city in very good ways. So we're very excited about that. One last thing for council. I don't think this got to you. I received yesterday a note from our HR department that I believe it's May 1st. We have a new employee starting with the finance group. And that is a replacement position for one that left us a short time ago. There's two things notable about that. When that person comes in, finance department will be fully staffed for essentially the first time since I took office and before. That's a huge accomplishment. We're going to start seeing things turning around there and being able to be much more productive. That combined with the assistance that Richard's getting from Robert Haft agency. And once we get the new software rolled out, then we'll really have arrived. But that alone is big. And she happens to be a native of the Ukraine. And that's pretty cool too. So we're excited about that starting. Council, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you so much.